Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I have two tasks today. I'm going to give a 10-minute presentation, which will just set the topic. And then I'm going to hand it over to Senator Rahman, who's going to talk about sort of the bigger picture of exactly what the challenges are moving forward, particularly on action on the link between climate and inequality, about the challenge of multilateralism in a new world. So I have a few slides, which if people can put up. Okay. So I have a very simple message to give today, and I'm going to use some data to give that message. And that message is that the climate challenge in Pakistan is not only about climate justice. The climate challenge in Pakistan is fundamental to Pakistan's growth and development. So if we just operate or engage with this problem as one where we should be compensated for loss and damages, and basically we should have modes of financing, then I think we're missing the bigger picture, because the simple truth is we simply can't grow unless we center climate problems in our growth paradigm. So if you could go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on some historical data, which is really important. So could you go to the next slide, please? So if you look at this kind of left graph, which is a really important graph, that shows the evolution of GDP or growth in the human economies of the world, starting with 1000 AD and going all the way down to the 20th century. And you'll see two very distinct patterns. The first is GDP growth is flat and close to zero till 1800. And then it starts escalating at a very fast pace. And the reason for that is that human societies go through the Industrial Revolution. And growth enhances exponentially. So what this effectively means is people were close to starvation for about 800 years that we have economic data for. And the right graph is showing you what is the proportion of global population that was living in poverty. And you can see for the same period, it starts with 76%. And as the Industrial Revolution takes off and growth starts to happen, basically the proportion of people in poverty actually starts to fall. So Industrial Revolution in that sense changed the paradigm of growth, of welfare, of productivity, and of income in societies. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now the left graph is the same, but the right graph is telling another story, which is it's plotting CO2 emissions and average temperature rises. And this is, I think, the key point. The key point is that as early industrializers started to grow, they were not confronted with a human-made global climate crisis problem. So they could push on industrialization and grow without having a climate challenge. But if you particularly look at the red graph on the right, which is essentially showing you average temperature rises, and you see post-75, you see a very, very steep incline. So for any country that is a late industrializer and it's still struggling with industrialization, now it's confronted with a global climate problem. So, you can't duck this problem. The early industrializers could, because there was no climate problem to confront. But as late industrializers, you're confronted with this global climate problem. If you could move to the next slide. So the left is just showing what the predicted temperature rises are in Pakistan. They're pretty steep. By 2050, we have very good data. We would expect for there to be an addition of about a month where temperatures would be in excess of about 37 degrees Celsius. So the global warming is happening at a very, very fast pace. And what we also know is that this process of the global climate crisis is causing extreme weather events, and it's leading to extreme events like floods, landslides, drought, and a rise and intensity of heat waves, which are having huge productivity and other challenges for our country. Now, the important thing here is this is what I'm calling the 20th century climate challenge. And this is one part of the climate environmental challenge that Pakistan is facing. This is the part of the climate challenge that the early industrializers didn't face and we're now facing. But we continue to be wedded to paradigms of industrialization and growth that were adopted in the 19th and 20th century in the early industrializers. But there are two other challenges, which are, to me, very central to what I'm calling the climate and environmental problem, which are not related to the 20th century problem of global warming and the climate catastrophe, which are what I'm calling early industrializer environmental challenges, which are to do with public health and which are to do the way in which we are doing agriculture. So if you could move to the next slide. The next slide, please. The slide after this. So the important kind of evidence that we have on agriculture is that we have really falling fertility of soils in Pakistan. We have a loss of biodiversity. We have huge problems of deforestation, of unmanned grazing, and of urban sprawls eating into the agricultural landscape. These challenges were challenges that were dealt with by early industrializers too. In our case, what these challenges are doing is, if you look at the left graph and the orange bar to the left, which is Pakistan's agricultural productivity in comparison to other developing countries, you'll see we have now one of the lowest agricultural productivity rates, and it's been low for almost 30 decades. And this is one of the biggest causes of rural poverty, and it's related to these environmental challenges around agriculture, which early industrializers also faced, but they overcame. But we've had no policy thrust to address these challenges. If you could go to the next slide. The second challenge, which was also a challenge that is faced by early industrializers, if you could go to the next slide, please, is basically the problem of clean air, clean water, and clean sanitation. So you don't have to go far, you just have to open up a Dickens novel, which talks about London in the 19th century, and you have the challenges of dirty air, dirty water, and dirty sanitation as a problem that confronted industrialization. So this is also an environmental challenge of an early industrialization, which developed nations were able to overcome, but which we've singularly failed at overcoming. I mean, I don't want to take you through these bars in great detail, but the left bar, all it's showing is one of the biggest causes of the decline in life expectancy now. Again, we have very good data, is air pollution. And it's shaving off almost 3 years of an average Pakistani's life. And the loss of productivity and human capital that air pollution is resulting in has bigger effects. And the top bar, what it's plotting, particularly the light blue bars, is stunting. Pakistan is on the right. You compare that bar to a bar, any other bar for any other country, and stunting rates are very, very high. And they're integrally linked to the issue of water and sanitation. So the big message that I have is that unless you can confront these problems of public health, of the loss of fertility, biodiversity, water, and overgrazing, and other associated issues in agriculture, combined with the global climate problems that Pakistan is confronted, you won't be able to grow. So this is not business as usual. And this is not about justice. Of course, Pakistan is not the big polluter in the global warming sense, but it's a polluter in the sense of air pollution. It's a polluter in the sense of dirty water, bad sanitation. It's a polluter in terms of the effects we're having on fertility losses in agriculture, those are very localized problems. So we have to have a growth paradigm that amalgamates these and puts it bang in center in terms of our growth thinking. So the climate question is not separable from growth or human development. If you could go to the next slide, and I'm just going to end. So, usually we talk about there being a trade-off between climate and growth. We have very good evidence now as well that actually these problems that I've talked about are by 2050, we know that they're going to shave off a quarter from GDP growth in Pakistan. So if we don't address it, then we're kind of walking into a terrain which is going to make us poorer and our people less well off. And I think, unless we address it, there's no way to reverse it. The next slide, please. And the next slide. The next slide, please. Okay, so in addition to these big challenges that I've talked about as being central to our growth paradigm, I think for effective growth to happen, we have to have some key enablers which complement any growth strategy which centers climate and environment. And I'm going to talk about three things at a broad level because I have short time, and then I'm going to hand it over to Senator Rahman. The big challenge is we have to basically have a public investment strategy that centers climate, health, and human capital development. So unless these three things come together, the effectiveness of spending in terms of a climate-centered growth strategy is never going to pay dividends. And I think we need to push on that direction far more than what we're pushing right now. And this is really important because as the government of Pakistan increases the tax to GDP ratio, if that increase in tax to GDP ratio cannot translate into increased income and welfare for citizens through effective public investment, the legitimacy of that taxation policy will completely collapse. So if you want fiscal sustainability, then you have to have a public investment strategy that allows you to follow a green growth model. And if the three things don't link up, the whole edifice of both growth and sustainability is going to unravel. So that's one. The second thing is we have to have a revenue plan which is tied very clearly to green transformations. And we can talk afterwards about what I mean. I was talking to Senator Rahman, and she made a very important point about the importance of local action. And I think how do we more local governance to make actions effective and to engage the community has to be central to any kind of transformation. And finally, this is a question we don't talk about. And again, to me, it's not a social problem, but it's a human development and growth problem, is to tackle fertility. This is population and fertility as part of a transformative development and growth strategy. This left graph is shocking. All it's plotting is basically on the horizontal axis, the flat axis, which is horizontal, is children per women, and the vertical axis plots population growth rates. So all the dots, which are countries that you see on the left, are countries where fertility rates have gone down and population rates are low. You'll find India there, you'll find Vietnam there, you'll find China there, you'll find Sri Lanka there, because all these countries have hit replacement in terms of fertility growth. So the average is around 2 births per woman. If you look at the top right countries in which Pakistan is placed, these are countries with very high fertility rates and very high population growth rates. So what effectively this means is your population is going to continue to grow. And if you need major transformations in terms of structure and public investment, that simply won't be feasible if population continues to grow at this rate. So if you're going to think about population and fertility as a separate issue to a green growth and a green human development paradigm, then I think we've left the elephant in the room and we'll have missed the boat. And with that, I'll hand over to Senator Rahman. Thank you.